Servus and welcome to another episode of the Pro Hockey Pod, episode 77. We're back with the coaching series. We took a break there, a couple players from Mannheim there during our playoff run, and now the run's come to an end. We're back to the coaching series, which I think is always a fun one for all you coaches out there. I'm sure it's been awesome listening to various people in the jobs that maybe you hope to have one day and kind of hear about their path to how they got to where they are. And this week's no different. Um, this week's coach, another guy that grew up in Canada and Ontario there from Thorold. Me being from Burlington, that's not too far from me, and he came up through the junior B ranks before going on to the CIS, now as we call it USports, and then he began his pro career. Playing in the AHL on East Coast before heading over to Italy, and then after he was done playing, immediately transitioned to coaching, and he's had numerous jobs, whether it's been an assistant coach, a head coach, now the head coach at McGill University. Happy to have on, and someone that obviously worked with my boss here in Mannheim, Dallas Eakins. Happy to have on the Pro Hockey Pod this week, David Urquhart.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here.
So we always start the same way. I like kind of going back to your childhood there. As I said, Elite Prospects at least says that you were born in Thorold and grew up there. Like maybe talk about maybe the first childhood memory you have of growing up in that area.
Well, really lucky to grow up in a place like Thorold, small town, really tightly knit community. And one of the things that comes up, the common themes is that community aspect. And there's a lot of families that we're really close to, and a lot of friends that I'm still friends with today. And we're really lucky to be surrounded by people who love sport, both the, let's say, like the adult mentors in our town, and then also all of our friend group were avid sport enthusiasts. So growing up, it would be road hockey games after school, playing baseball at the park, and those friends that we would play with every day after school on the road for road hockey would be the same guys that we played with, compete with in minor hockey and baseball in the summer and lacrosse and that sort of stuff. So it was a really, really cool place to grow up. Really lucky to grow up in a place like that. And those friends that we grew up with, they end up kind of being like family. So all these years back now, living away from Thorold for so long. Anytime we go back, it's great because you talk to your friends, and it's like no time has passed. So that's one big aspect of it. And the other part, when I think about growing up is family was really important. And my parents were both hardworking people. My mom was a teacher, father worked at the arena. And so you kind of look at those two things together, and then what do you get? You get a coach, a teacher, and someone who's at the arena all the time. So because that's when I think about a coach, the essence of being a coach is being a good teacher. So I didn't plan on that. When I was growing up, I didn't think about that a whole lot. Just thought about having fun and playing sport, and was really lucky to have support my parents, and my on my mother's side, the my grandparents were Italian, so I ended up playing in Italy for 3 years, have an Italian passport. But that part of it too is you learn a lot about work ethic and perseverance and industriousness. And my grandfather and his brother had a farm where they would do a lot of grow a lot of their own food, right? And when I think about that experience and bringing it back to where I am now as a coach, I think a lot about the comparisons of being on the farm and coaching and people. And it's with the being on the farm, you plant seeds, and it takes a lot of time to cultivate those seeds, cultivate the garden, cultivate the crops. And there's weeds that grow up, and you gotta make sure you water it. And it's a lot like running a team, where there's challenges that come up, adversity that comes up throughout the year. And you have to face that adversity. So pull the weeds as you go, and you have to water the seeds, and as educating your team and providing them with support that they can get stronger. And then you know as the season goes, or as multiple seasons go, you get the fruits of the labor of having hopefully having some success in the playoffs and down the road. So I think about those experiences and how they've influenced my approach as a coach, and overall, really lucky to have grown up in a place like Thorold and really laid the foundation for my life. And I was actually there until I was 19 years old because I played junior B before coming to McGill. So unlike a lot of guys moving away early to play major junior hockey, I was lucky enough to stay at home and have that experience of really having deep rooted friendships and deep rooted relationships with my family before moving away. And I think that's provided a really good foundation for me to do the things that I've been able to do in my life with hockey. Go traveling around the world and living in all these different places, knowing that I have a good foundation of those people that support me back home.
Yeah, a lot to dive into there. First of all, that analogy, I don't think I've ever heard that one before, but it honestly made a lot of sense. And yeah, it was definitely a good one. I'm happy you brought it up. And the kind of the small town upbringing, and as you mentioned, like I grew up in Peterborough before I moved to Burlington, so we had the Pete's, and that was kind of like our NHL. You go to those games on Thursday, stuff like that. Like you growing up in Thorold there, obviously they have the junior B team, the Blackhawks, which you ended up playing for, as you mentioned. Was that also like maybe when you were a kid and like playing minor hockey, was that kind of also the team maybe you looked up to like kind of go watch on the weekends too before eventually playing for them? Sorry.
Yeah, and it was kind of when you go back to the community, it was one of those things that brought the community together. So we'd grow up, especially let's say getting older in elementary school and high school, we'd be going to those games, and it's something you want to be a part of. And they had a really great coach. So a good story to tie into there is look, I only played a few games in Thorold before getting traded to Welland, so I had to play against a lot of my childhood friends growing up, and they had the best team, and they had a really good coach, Dan Timmons, and his son now is playing in the NHL, Connor. And so Dan that he was the coach there in Thorold. They had a lot of success. They won a bunch of championships, and he was also the owner of the butcher shop, Big Red Markets in Thorold. And I happened to work at the butcher shop too, so he was always good because he let me work in the mornings and play in the evenings when we play against Thorold. So maybe I was a little tired when we play our games against Thorold, but no, he was great, and it was interesting to see. It's another one of those things to reflect back on. It was a team that had a lot of success over a long period of time there. And I don't know if you recall, because I know you like from the area, and it was a little bit before your time, but I think it was probably 5 or 6 years where they were winning the championship, and it makes you think about what does it take to win and what does it take to be successful over long periods of time. And they had built a really good culture there where it was competitive, high standards, and high expectations for success. And being around that stuff and seeing it, and unfortunately, wasn't part of it. I didn't get to be on those teams, but my friends were, and so that was a big part of that experience of seeing that. And I played there until I was 19 years old, and my goal was always to get an education while playing hockey. And so playing junior B and well in there, I had an opportunity to come back as a 20-year-old to stay in the junior B loop, and was lucky enough to get an opportunity to come to McGill and to play, and really no promises about getting in the lineup or anything like that. And took a chance, moved away from home, and at that point, that was one of the best decisions of my life because McGill opened so many doors for me in terms of hockey, and then just being a part of the alumni network here that continues to provide a lot of support in my growth as a player, and then now growth as a coach.
That's something that I've actually have for later in the episode because you've done something which is unique at McGill. You've been a player, you've been an assistant coach, and now a head coach. So it's kind of come full circle, and you've had almost every position there. But we're going to get to that later. Kind of back to what you growing up there. The Welland Arena. I mean, I just remember that as a kid. Like I think AAA team was the Welland Tigers or something when I was growing up. So I remember that old cool rink and stuff like that. So it's just when I saw that you had played there, it made me like smile. And I remember they always used to have like the square nets, and it used to drive me insane because as a goalie, like you're trying to get like your angles and stuff, and it just like it was always in Welland. But You growing up there in the Thorold area, like Welland Thorold, as we mentioned, there's two routes when you're kind of playing junior hockey that you can go. The first one, I think, as for us as Canadians, is the OHL. Like that's what we see, hear about. Our friends are trying to get drafted, all stuff like that. And then obviously you have the NCAA route. And you mentioned you were looking to get an education before making the decision to end up going the USports CIS route to McGill. Had you ever thought about the other two routes in terms of maybe trying the OHL or the NCAA route?
Yeah, and those were both things that I thought about quite a bit growing up. The reality of it was probably wasn't close to being good enough there. And it's funny when you look back 10 years later and you see where your hockey pathway wait well, see where my hockey pathway took me. It's interesting to see, like, yeah, I think at that time, it was, I think they would take like the top 100 bantam players for, kind of like an OHL combine. And I wasn't even close. Like I was never in that group. So when it came down to that, like I was never on any draft list, was never any close to that. So, um, and that's one of the interesting things about, I think, growing up where we did is we had a lot of guys who were just really dedicated to hockey, that loved it and that wanted to get better. And uh those are the guys that we come back to, in the summer and say, okay, well, what are you doing? Like, what are you learning from where you are, and how can you get better from learning from the people around you? So we had a lot of guys growing up that, moved away to go play in the OHL, and a couple of guys that went to go play in the NCAA, like Sean Bentivolio went to Niagara U. He would have been there, I think, the year before you went there.
Yeah, he was in one of those classes and we just missed each other, but obviously I know his name, so
Yeah, yeah, and then and then quick another sidebar. We had a lot of Burlington Cougars on our junior B there team in Welland too. We seem to recruit from there too, so it's there's a lot of connections there. But anyways, going back to going back to that concept there of um, uh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I put myself off there. Where
no, we were talking about the different routes there, and you said you weren't
oh
on the list and stuff growing up.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was something that I wanted to do, and I think when I was 19 years old, I sent out and that's dating myself a little bit, a video cassette to 10 different schools, with a highlight, like a legitimate highlight tape, a video cassette VCR. Mailed it out to 10 different schools, eight NCAA schools, two Canadian schools, and then really the uh, the only one that responded was McGill, and so that kind of led the pathway to how I ended up at McGill specifically. But and it's funny because you look at that and you say, there's a lot of and as a coach now, when we get people reaching out, I make sure that either myself or my assistant coach uh, contacts, responds to all those emails and all those outreach, because I know what it's like to be in those situations. And there's a lot of guys that have the potential to be good players that if you look hard enough you can find them. So that's going through that myself was interesting, and then coming to McGill was a huge step up, at 19 years old. uh so playing against guys who were all finished their junior eligibility essentially, and it's a big step up going from junior B to Canadian University hockey. So was really lucky to have an outstanding coach here named Martin Raymond. He went on from McGill. He ended up coaching in the NHL in Tampa Bay and Ottawa, and learned a lot from him from the X's and O's side, but probably mostly about how to be a better person and be a good leader, and all those things that come along outside of the game. And as a coach, I try to model myself after a lot of the things that he did with my development in the team.
Another question I had for you before we get to McGill there, well, kind of leading up to it, as you mentioned, you went like you still had 1 year of eligibility to play your overage year there of junior. Um, there's always a debate of what to do, I would say, because some people will tell you, hey, if you feel ready, like move on. And then there's other people that are like, man, like one more year of junior, like you never know what could happen. Maybe an NCAA team comes calling, or maybe this chance comes calling, whatever it is. Like, did you kind of feel that, after the 19, 20-year-old year, you were like, you know what, I'm ready to go to school. I want to take the next step in my life? Or did you ever have any thoughts of, hey, maybe I should have stayed another year? Like, kind of how was that for you?
The education piece was big for me. I was as I when I in my 19-year-old year, I was studying part-time at Brock University because I was still keeping that NCAA option open. And looking around the league, I didn't see a whole lot of guys getting scholarships. There was a handful, like Sean Bentivoglio would be one of them, but not a whole lot. And I thought, if I can get my university degree in the next 3 or 4 years, that's kind of where I want to be. And didn't really have a lot of pro aspirations at the time. Understanding where I was at 19 years old playing junior B, there's the pathway is not that clear when you're there, as opposed to if you're playing major junior hockey or playing somewhere else. So no, at that point it was I wanted to continue my education. I wanted to continue to play hockey and get my education at the same time, and I thought it was a really good opportunity to get to McGill and do those two things.
And then, as you said, you end up going to McGill there for 4 years, and you brought up that first coach, Martin Raymond, there that you were with for a couple of years. And one of my questions to you was, I noticed you were a letter multiple years you were there, and I'm always curious, how someone characterizes himself as a leader, and maybe the requirements that come to wearing a letter, whether it's an A or a C. And you brought up your coach there; it obviously taught you as well how to be, a leader. So when you were there at school, like, what were you trying to do every day? How were you trying to maybe lead your team and kind of represent the school itself?
The leadership aspect, it's one of those things that I continue to study now. And looking back to that time, the thing that I really focused on was getting better every day. And even now, that's one of the values of our team is get better every day. And if you can bring that, you're going to give yourself the best chance to succeed in whatever it is you're in. And so looking back there, when I came in my first year, we had 8 D-men. I was the eighth D and played just over half the games. And uh, so you get something out of that experience of sitting out and really having that strong passion to play and looking around and seeing what you need to do to succeed in that environment. And then my second year, we had 6 of those guys graduated, and it was myself and Steve Pierce was my D partner, and we lived together and the residents at McGill in our first year together, and it was now all of a sudden we were the veteran guys on the back end. So that kind of that's where that opportunity meets luck meets opportunity, and being prepared. Luck equals preparedness plus opportunity, and you know that first year prepared me for that opportunity to have a shot. And it's not like I was like the first power play guy in my junior B team, and then all of a sudden we need somebody to be that guy on a very good team at McGill. And that first year, looking around at the environment, looking at the guys around, say, okay, what does it take to succeed? Just trying to do everything in my power to get better. And was really, really fortunate to have a coach like Marty who could support me through that from the tactical side. Had a lot to learn from that because it's another level playing university sport than junior B. And then also from, the personal leadership, that sort of thing. So, it was, he spent a lot of time with myself and the whole team about developing leadership and developing character and what it like defining what it looks like to be a good teammate and the vision, mission, and values and all those things that were uh, really prevalent for our team. And as a leader, what often happens is you end up being a culture carrier and you have to live by the values of the team. So if you're someone that aligns with the coach's values, and if you're someone that lives those values on a daily basis, then you end up being one of those people who spreads a positive culture, and that carries that culture of the team. And looking back, I was probably one of those people. And lucky enough, early in my career in that second year to be a part of that leadership group and carry that forward for the next 3 years. And at the time, the team was kind of on the precipice of taking the next step in its evolution, because the team hadn't won a Queen's Cup, which is the OUA championship, in over 60 years. And we had been right there leading up to that for several years, and Marty had built a really good program and a really strong culture before we got in there. And we were knocking at the door. And in my first year, we had lost in the conference final, and in a heartbreaking game. And that experience helped us propel us forward. In that next year, we finally got over the hump. In my second year, we got to play in the Queen's Cup. We didn't win that time, but again, that experience, as a young player, again, I guess I would have been 21 at the time, taking that forward got to be the captain in my fourth year. We got another shot at that Queen's Cup, and we got to win it. And that was first time in over 60 years that the program had won. So it was a pretty special moment for the team. And we had a big group of guys who were part of that journey and had experienced some loss, and got to experience the taking that next step. And after we graduated, it was really nice to see the team continue to have that success after we left. And Marty actually left a year after. He coached one more year after I graduated, and then he ended up going to the American League and then the NHL. But one of the things that was great to see was that the team continued to have success after that. And in my fourth year, he shared a book, a chapter from the book Good to Great, and it talked about level 5 leadership. And that concept, what the message, the underlying message was, great leaders can bring teams to be successful. And he said, but those level 5 leaders are the ones that create a sustaining and enduring environment that allows there to be success after they leave. And that's something that our leadership group took to heart. And we spent a lot of time on passing on the cultures and traditions that had been built up over the years for the team to have success. So, and the team hadn't won the national championship ever in its history. And then 5 years after we left, there was still two players that we had played with that were on that national championship winning team in 2012. And for all of us who were part of it, we felt like we were part that played. I graduated in 2008. We all felt like we were part of that success of the team, because we knew that, it wasn't built overnight. That success doesn't just happen. And a lot of the cultures, traditions, the standards, the expectations were passed on through the team. And that's a lot, about when you bringing it back to that point on leadership. It's one thing to lead by example, and then it's another thing to be able to pass that on and have that endure over longer periods of time. And that's that's why now, as a coach, tying that back in, when we have our leadership development meetings, we look at things like that and different aspects to say, okay, well, how can we make our environment better? And I'm interested to hear. It's a little bit different in pro hockey, because there's a lot more. At least in the American League, there's a lot more like player movement. But you find in Europe and Germany, it's you have a little bit more time to work with the leaders, because the local players tend to be there for longer periods of time.
Yeah, like as you mentioned, like us, so in Germany here, like every team you're allowed to dress 9 imports each night max, and you have 11 total on your roster by the end of the year for teams like us. And so yeah, most of your core is German passport players. So it's guys who play national team, or who have in the past maybe been in North America, come back. And yeah, so building the culture, you're trying to build a core of these German players with a lot of the characteristics that you brought up, the leadership, the positive mindset, the work ethic, having the goal of being champions, etc. So, like I was telling you off camera, I think from last year to this year, the we had a lot of turnover. We had a lot of guys like leave, go other teams, retire, whatever it was, and we brought in a bunch of new faces, and it was amazing to see how even in the first year how well that they bought in right away to what Dallas's vision is for this organization. And if you want to call it this 3-year plan, I don't know how many years you could put there, but so we've basically, as you said, to back to one of your references, we've planted the seed. Like we've put those core pieces in place, and now it's just about tweaking, maybe finding supportive guys, whatever we're looking for each season. So definitely in Europe, when you get to the leagues, like whether it's Germany or Finland, Sweden, stuff like that, majority of the home country players are the ones that you need to build around, and then you can bring in imports if you need. So it's to your point, it would be a lot different than maybe in the American League where there's so much turnover, calling up, call up, call downs, as you said. Um, which kind of brings me to my next point. Like you, after McGill, you end up going on to starting your pro playing career. Um, Back then too, I would have to say, given like for me, the U Sports route has come so far in the past 20 years. Like I think it's gained a lot more respect, and not to say before it shouldn't have, but just for whatever reason now there's so many guys signing pro, doing well, going on to have careers. So for you, when you sign your pro career, there you start this journey, and I like to call it the undrafted grind, as you know, the call up, the call down, the East Coast AHL. Like one, was it always your plan to try to play pro after? And two, do you want to talk about the 3 years there of that grind, like being called up, being sent down, kind of like that?
It was always a dream. Every kid in Canada that plays hockey, I think that's their dream, is to play in the NHL. And I never thought I was really close. Like it wasn't really that realistic for me, pretty much all the way up until maybe my last year at in my fourth year university. Then start to hear a little bit about some pro scouts coming to watch and that sort of stuff. And had to work really hard for it, even there, because now at that time we're talking about sending CDs or DVDs with game film to agents. I didn't even have an agent, so I was lucky enough to get the we have another McGill alumnus, Matthew Darsh, who kind of forged that pathway before me. He had played in the NHL and the American League, and was contacted him, and he hooked me up with his agent, who got me a training camp in New York, summer development camp. So I went to that, and that's how I ended up getting an AHL contract coming out of McGill. And it was tough, because coming out of there, I was really green, didn't know what the pro life was all about. And we're used to playing 28 games. I played with a full cage even my first year of university, because they hadn't changed the rule yet to a visor until my second year. So coming out, and it's a completely different experience. You're on the ice a lot more often with the morning skates, more games. So it was, you know, uh, a big step up, but then kind of again, similar to from junior B to university, if you're prepared for it. And that was one of my edges, was that it was in really good shape. And that's how I separated myself from a lot of the other guys. So yeah, I got started off in the East Coast League, played 7 games down there. And I remember the first call up, it was Halloween night, and it was in Charlotte, and Charlotte's an outstanding place to play. It's a fun city. And just starting to get to know the guys. We had gone to a NASCAR race together, so we had started building a pretty good bond with the guys. And it was Halloween, and we had one big home game, and we're all planning on going out after the game. And I remember after the game, I came to the locker room, and I had a Red Bull, and I was getting all fired up to go and have a good night with the guys. And coach calls me to the office, and he's like, "You probably know why I'm calling in here." I'm like, "No, like what happened?" And he's like, "You're going up to Hartford. Two D-men got injured." And I said, "Oh, geez, okay." He's like, pack up your stuff. You're flying in the morning." So uh, And so I was up basically all night packing and, had bought a bunch of stuff for our apartment. I didn't know if I was going anywhere. So we, spent a bunch of money at whatever, Walmart and, TVs and all that stuff. And just left everything there that morning and then played that night and lucky enough to score my first shift in Hartford and to kind of solidify a little bit of a spot there to earn yourself a couple extra days and that was kind of it. Like now you're in an environment where I was living in a hotel. I lived in a hotel for the whole year. Um, and always just wondering that getting sent down is right around the corner. And that was kind of the experience for 3 years in the American League. That the next year I started, I made the opening day roster, or so I was there at the start of the year in Hartford, and then ended up to end the year in Charlotte. It was in the East Coast League at the time, Charlotte, and so it was kind of the opposite in my second year, and then my third year I was up and down quite a bit with Hamilton and Wheeling. And it was like, it's a lot of those typical experiences I'm sure you've heard from other people on the podcast is, we're on the bus on the way to a game somewhere in the state of Michigan and our coach gets a call and the bus drops me off at the airport and I'm flying back to Hamilton to go or flying somewhere to go play a game for Hamilton and it's just kind of you're always in limbo and I think at that point I was 26 years old and that up and down life it's not conducive to the quality of life isn't great and that's when I decided to go play in Italy. And I had my Italian passport at that time, and the goal was to play on the Italian national team. And so you had to play in Italy for 3 years before you get that opportunity. So, it was pretty. It was a great experience being there in the American League. Learned a lot as a player, as a person, challenged myself, pushed myself to the limits as a player, and kind of when you talked about the grind, you mentioned it a little bit before. Like when you're an American League contract guy and you're up against guys that are prospects that are draft picks, the reality of the situation is you have to outplay them and you can't just outplay them by a little bit. You have to outplay them by a lot to earn yourself an NHL contract. And I was maybe close in my first year to that, but after that was never really close to outplaying guys to earn that NHL contract. So that's when I made the change over to Europe, and I thought that was pretty cool too. It's kind of like coming back to your roots because my mother's side of the family is Italian, and got to uh, got to learn a little bit of Italian, and they really experienced the culture. So that was the quality of life was a lot better there, but that came with its own challenges too. If we can maybe talk about that after.
Yeah, quickly before we talk about the jump overseas here, doing a little research there, I noticed you played with. I think of him as a Burlington guy because I grew up with him, training with him for years. He was kind of one of the guys in our. We had a group of 90s and 91s that always trained together, and then there was the group before us, the 84s, 85s that were playing pro, had been through it, that we kind of looked up to and would kind of ask questions and try to keep up with them. And one of them was Corey Locke, who
Oh yeah.
you played with in Hartford there. He now resides in Burlington and works for the minor hockey, the Eagles there. But I don't know if it was the same for you, but I remember like around that time, that was him when every year it seemed like he'd be leading the AHL in scoring and you just get like a couple games, whether it was with, Montreal or the Rangers. And he obviously went on to have a very good career, but I didn't know if you knew him that well and just like wanted to say something about him, but we can also jump to the Italian part of it too.
No, yeah, no, he was a great teammate, great guy to play with. And funny enough, one of those things, one of my good friends had played in Ottawa with him. So we had met him like when we were in high school. And he was an elite player in the OHL too. So it was pretty cool, and then we ended up getting to play together years later. So we had that connection. And yeah, I know he was an outstanding player. I think at all like anywhere he ended up, he always was a guy who was a top scorer, and he's a really good player for us too. We were close. He's a really good guy. Yeah.
Just as for my experience, like training with him in the summers, being a goalie, like he just had the unreal patience and he had this weird release and it was so hard, at least for me. I mean, I wasn't very good, but it was so hard for me to get it. And he would just laugh all the time because he'd come to the front of the net and be like, I'm going to score. You know, I'm going to score, right? And I'd be like, no, no, I got this. And then it would just be pinging in and that'd be, yeah, because he just was such a unique player and great guy too. I still see him sometimes in the summer, but, yeah, back to kind of your route there. You mentioned so after those 3 years, you end up going over to Italy. Um, your plan at the time, I'm sure, was to play for the national team. You play 3 years there, having the passport and everything, and you end up playing 3 years there. You end up winning a championship in your last year, which is obviously a tremendous feat. As you mentioned, it is a different way of life. Europe itself, I'd say, is way more laid back and easygoing. No one's in a rush to do anything. Some countries I've been in, they're very big on their, lunch is lunch, and that's going to be a 2 hour break or a 3 hour break. Like when I played in France, it would be seeing the bank lady for 3 hours at the restaurant, just crushing a bottle of wine or two, and then go back to work after. Like it's just so in no rush to do anything, all la di da. But obviously, in Italy, there the food is tremendous. I went to Rome once, pizza pasta every day, didn't gain a pound. It's incredible how that happens. But how was your 3 years there? And obviously, too, the maybe some of the culture things, and then obviously your last year winning the championship.
The last year playing in Written Renan was, really special. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I actually went back there for my honeymoon a couple of years ago because I met my wife after I had played there, and I had to take her back there just to experience what it's like. Uh, but overall, I think when I think about playing in Italy, I think the major comparison is the quality of life is great, and I think that's one of the European cultural traits is that they appreciate things like the quality of food and time with family and that sort of thing a lot differently than we do in North America. And then the second thing that stands out is that it was really hard to get paid.
I've heard those rumors too about some of the Italian teams.
Especially if you don't win. So, the team that we won on, it was great. We got all our bonuses, we got all our money. The other 2 years, it was difficult, and it's a lot of the things around that getting paid was a new experience to me. And I think to sum it up the best is people call it the Domani League. And, because they say that's when you get paid Domani. Domani means tomorrow. And so they call it the Domani League. And it's Domani or Dopo Domani. And if somebody tells you you're getting paid Dopo Domani, that means after tomorrow. Then that could mean any time from tomorrow or the day after tomorrow or a month from now. So that's the scary aspect. One thing is one of our first paychecks is they came into the room the next day, and I guess the Italian banking laws had changed recently, and we got paid half in cash, half in check. And the guys who went to deposit the cash into the bank, they got denied, and then the word got back to the team saying that, you know, these guys are trying to deposit all this cash to the bank, and you can't do that because there was anti-money laundering rules, and it was something along the lines of there's a maximum that you could deposit. So the GM actually came in the locker room the day after we got paid, and he says, you can't deposit the cash we gave you into the bank because they're going to ask where it came from, and if you tell them where it came from, we're going to have to report it on the taxes. And if we do that, we're not going to be able to pay you. So those are the experiences that you get playing over there, that it's almost hard to believe. And uh, one of the things coming, I know, fast forward a little bit, coming back and actually working at McGill is, when I was hired here, they said, okay, well, you get paid, every 2 weeks on Friday. And then I couldn't believe it on Friday when I actually looked at my bank account and the money was in there. Because for 3 years in Italy, well, at least the first 2 years, they would say you get paid before the first whatever 10, 12 days of the month, but it was never there. Never. Every month you're waiting, wondering. So that was one of those challenges. But I mean, the great thing there is, similar to where how you have in Germany with 9 imports, where there's 8 to 10 imports, and you're really closely knit with those guys, and you get to do a lot of really interesting things, especially during the national team breaks. There's one in the fall and one in February usually, and that the coach is usually pretty lenient with time off, and you might have a little block of 4 days to travel. And so we got to see over those 3 years, got to see a lot of really cool parts of Europe on a short flight or a short drive to different parts of Italy. And that's one of the things that, as a person, I'm really really thankful for that opportunity to explore and travel and experience different cultures in different countries. And yeah, that's one of the beauties about playing in Europe.
Yeah, for sure. The money thing is hilarious to me because I think in every country there's always something that happens. Like for me now being in Mannheim, it's like I know within these 2 days every month I'm gonna get my money. But there, like you, there was experiences for me in some countries and leagues where it's like one month it would show up on the first, the next month it would show up on the ninth, the next month it would show up on the 18th. Like just because of like depending on the season, depending on how the attendance was at home games, like you never knew. And like you made me laugh when you're like, yeah, it's so weird. Like every 2 Fridays I have money in my account. Like it's really
Yeah.
weird. Like it's just funny. Like people who haven't been to Europe and haven't played over, like they would just think it's totally like, what do you mean? It's just normal. This is a North American work life. But it's like for us who, went another route and did that, it's kind of funny. But as you mentioned, I always tell people if you ever want to travel Europe, you just got to get over here because once you're over here, like whether it's driving, train, short flights, like the travel is cheap. All these countries are so close by. So I recommend anyone who's whether they're playing or not playing, if they can come over, like you can use those breaks. You can go like I don't know how many countries I've seen in my time here, probably 9 other countries that I never would have pictured
Mhm.
myself going to. So um, back to your career there, as you mentioned, you played 3 years there in Italy. I said too that you ended up winning the championship the last year there in Renan, and after that you transitioned in the coaching world. So pretty good way to end your playing career is by being a champion, I would say. So you end up returning home, which I'll say to McGill University there as an assistant coach. I'm going to skip a part ahead of that because I want to talk about. This is a great story. We talked about it off camera. And for anyone listening out there, always take a chance if you're offered it. That's my message because when you hear this story, it'll make you laugh out loud. Hearing this made me smile, and I was like, there's no way that's true. So you ended up working 3 years for the San Diego Gulls in the American Hockey League as an assistant coach. There was a very famous, I'll say, because I know the person who was the head coach at the time, story of how you got the assistant coaching job. And I'll lead you into the story and you can go into it. But basically, I know that you gave Dallas Eakins your resume. At the time, I believe their coaching staff was fuller. It might not have been what they were looking for. And then there was some coaching event or something going on, and I can't remember where it was, if it was in Vegas or something. Um, Dallas is a big runner, loves to get out early and go for his runs. And I'll transition to you now. Do you want to explain, you know, Dallas's invitation, what evidently happened with the invitation, and then, obviously you end up getting a job from this invitation.
Yeah. So it comes back to luck equals preparation plus opportunity. And so you got the story pretty much right there where, the assistant coaching job I had been referred to it. I'd sent Dallas my resume and then hadn't really heard anything. And it was the NHL Coach Association conference. It was in Dallas, Texas, of all places. And it was the day before the the conference, and Dallas had sent out a tweet saying 6 a.m. run club, meet out front of American Airlines Arena, and all coaches invited. And that was just kind of an open invitation for the morning of that event. And Dallas was presenting on culture as well. And at the time, and this is the preparation part, I'll say, like at the time, I was doing a master's degree in sports psychology, studying culture, studying coaches that had won multiple championships. And, it was something that still remains today as a passion for me. And then always I've tried to stay in good shape. As mentioned earlier, like that was kind of one of my separators as a pro player, that I was always in good conditioning. So when I started coaching, I just kind of kept that habit and kept going. So somebody had sent me that tweet. I didn't see it, and they said you should go. And I was like, no, I was like, I don't know about it. And they're like, yeah, you should go. And normally those coaches conference, you spend a lot of time with guys. You usually end up going out and coaches get together from all over the place and you get to see each other and you end up having a couple drinks the night before the event. And it was no different that night. So I was with some of the guys and it was like 11 o'clock or 11:30. It's like, I gotta go. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just, we're just starting the night. And I was like, no, I gotta get up at 5:15 and I'm going for a run. So so I show up at whatever, a little, maybe 5:45 just before we go, and I'm wearing my McGill stuff, and actually Dallas recognized me because I guess because of the resume, and he's like, oh, you must be Dave, and I was like, yeah. So we started running. There was four other coaches that showed up. So four coaches that were brave enough to get up that early and show up. And so we start running with the group of us, and sure enough, after a couple minutes, the other two coaches, they weren't in very good shape, so they dropped off. And then there was one more that kind of jogged with us for another couple minutes, and then all of a sudden they dropped off too. They weren't in very good shape, I guess, and Dallas is in great shape. So we end up running probably for about 30 minutes, just the two of us. And he's like, all right, well, might as well kind of interview you while we're running, give or take. And so then we just started chatting really informally about while we're running, talking about culture, talking about things like New Zealand All Blacks and how they run their culture there, and how the different, a lot of the things that we were aligned on with that. And so coming out of that, like, luckily I was in good enough shape to run with him that whole time because he's still in great shape, I imagine. And yeah, so out of that, got to meet Dave Nonis the next day. He was the assistant GM at the time, and they said, okay, we'll get back to you. And that ended up with as a job as an assistant there with a great staff in San Diego. Um, because Sylvain Lefebvre was hired as the D coach at the same time, and got to learn a lot from both Dallas and Sly, and then later, after Dallas moved to the NHL, Kevin Dineen got to be around a lot of guys who were really great at what they do, and that's formed myself as a coach too. A lot of the things that I do come from those guys.
It's crazy from you just getting up at 5 to go for a run led to such a tremendous opportunity and obviously a great thing to add to your resume. Obviously, coaching in the American Hockey League for 3 years there, and yeah, from Dallas' side, like I've worked with him for a year and a half now, and yeah, great mind, great guy too. Always happy to lend a hand and always interested in the new thing and expanding his knowledge and helping people out. And yeah, like he's still every day. It's funny, you wouldn't believe it now, and maybe he'll get mad for me saying this on air, but I've never seen somebody eat more peanut M&Ms in my life than this guy does. Like we have this like jar that sits beside his desk, and it's these are like the 500-gram bags that go in there, whatever they are, like the big yellow bags. And every day we're refilling this thing because he drinks coffee and he eats these peanut M&Ms, and then he goes in the sauna and does his workouts. Like that's just all he does if he's not watching videos. So it's pretty funny to see how he still stays in shape with that
Yeah.
diet. But um, yeah, now back to kind of your career there. Like you've come full circle, and I had a guest on before, Mike Harder. He's at Colgate University. He played, went back. I believe you guys actually played against each other in Italy one year. I was doing my research there, but he did the kind of same thing as you. He played for Colgate University, then he went back as an assistant, went somewhere else, came back, and now he's the head coach there. Maybe talk about you going back to McGill, getting the head coaching job, and just as you mentioned, the alumni feeling of always being able to give back to that program that obviously gave something to you, gave you a chance. And also, what types of maybe players, people are you looking to recruit at McGill?
Uh, yeah, the part about going full circle, I think that's passion. There's a connectedness to this program that it goes deeper than just coaching hockey. And I kind of alluded to it earlier. When the team had success after I graduated, I felt like I was a part of it. And I wanted, like, as a coach coming back, that's something I'd like to create for the guys that are coming through here. And uh, so when you have success at a place like this, where the alumni network is really strong and really involved and connected to the team, it has a lot of meaning, and it's really fulfilling, as not just on a, when you have success, let's say in pro hockey, it feels great for the team, feels great for the staff and the supporters. uh but this seems to have a little bit more, a different, it's fulfilling on a different level, because those supporters are, your friends, your colleagues, and if you're able to bring them some joy by having the team be run in a way that's conducive to the values that they played with, I think that's pretty satisfying as a coach. So, um, now, to be able to come back to that, and I think the experience of going and playing in different places, going to play in the American League and Italy, and being able to coach in the American League with some really great people, is that you learn a lot from those experiences, and you take them back to something that was really good here, and you get to add some pieces to the puzzle. So, like, I follow a line of great coaches that came before me. I spoke about Marty Raymond, who was my coach. Even before that, there was coaches who laid the foundation here, guys like Ken Tyler and Herb Medill, and um, uh, following Marty was another one of my mentors, which was Kelly Nobes, and he was the coach who won the national championship here, and I was his assistant for 4 years. Those experiences really form who you are as a coach, and they form your vision, and uh, they help form your values and non-negotiables and the things that you present to the team. And so when it comes time that I got to be the head coach here, a lot of those pieces, a lot of pieces from all those coaches were in that puzzle. They're all in that vision and in that blueprint for success that we had laid out here when we arrived. And so when it comes to what type of people that we bring into the program when we're recruiting, that's what we try to align with, is those values of, like, for us, the four values that we focus on are getting better every day, relentless work ethic, competing, and enjoying the journey. And so we look for people that align with that. And our goal, our vision, is to be the best student athletes in the country. So you have to have that urge, that desire to be the best, academically and athletically, to be here. And it's not for everybody. And some people just want to go on and have a pro career and continue to develop, which is great. But the challenge of being at a school like McGill is that you have to have that academic side of things, and the people that we end up bringing in are, because of that aspect, that they do want to succeed in hockey, and they want to succeed outside of that. Um, we end up bringing in lot of really high quality people that end up doing a lot of interesting stuff down the road, and not just in hockey. Like, there's 3 alumni that are playing in the American League right now. So we still have guys that are going to play pro. Even from last year's graduating class, 4 out of the 5 guys went on to play pro. So there's that aspect. But then, other guys are getting contracts, in finance and consulting, and going out to be doctors and lawyers and all that kind of stuff. So it's really lucky to be here at a place like that, where you get to bring in good people, and then, usually by the time they leave, they're smarter than me and they're making more money. So
Definitely talking to, obviously, Eric Uba, who was with us now, who was with you last year and for 3 years there. Like, he's a very bright kid, and I remember even this year, like, he graduated last year in the summer, started taking a German course just for fun to kind of learn, and then during the year this year he was bored, so he's like, yeah, I'm gonna work on this, and just started doing something for another certificate. So obviously he's a
yeah,
very bright individual, and we mentioned off camera, very hardworking, and yeah, got a hell of a shot. But obviously last year last season, what I mean, 23, 24. You guys had winning the bronze medal game there, which I think is a tremendous feat for you as a coach being third. Um, Seeing that program grow since you've been there. Um, Another thing I wanted to talk to you about too is, as I mentioned off camera, like the new rules that have come in here for eligibility. Obviously, for those who don't know or haven't heard it yet, before it was always you go major junior or you go the NCAA route, and if you played major junior, you couldn't go the NCAA route. Now that's obviously changed, where a lot of guys are going to play junior and major junior, and then go on to NCAA after, get these scholarships. It's been crazy how many commitments I've seen. You as a U sports coach, how does that affect you as a school, and like how does it maybe change in a good way, bad way? Who knows yet? You're thinking towards recruiting because maybe before you were always looking for guys who were playing the major junior route that were going to age out and then they would go U Sports, where now they still have the option to go the NCAA route.
First, it's a great opportunity for these players. Thinking back probably to you and I when we're going through and making that choice, we talked about it earlier, saying, okay, well, am I going to go major junior or am I going to go the NCAA route? And I always think that Canadian University option is really good too. So we'll put that caveat in there that you don't have to decide when you're 14 or 15 years old, right? And I have some friends who have kids that are at that point, and then it's so tough to say, well, how do you know? Because you at that age, it's so difficult to decide. So I think it's great for the player to have that opportunity as they go through. Now, as a coach, uh, in the past few years, our recruits have generally come from the CHL. I would say 90% of our recruits are coming mostly from the Q, but also from the OHL and WHL. So that changes our landscape quite a bit. It's more challenging in the short term because we're well known to players in Quebec, where they understand the quality of the university, the quality of the hockey that we have, and there's three really good teams in Quebec, and they understand that that's a really good option, and our division's really strong, and they're going to continue to develop as hockey players and people in school here. So the challenge now is that pool of players who would kind of understand the quality of this route. This year, they've all been, the vast majority of them have been committing to the NCAA schools across the board of the CHL. So that's forced us to rethink our recruiting strategy and explore a little bit more of the landscape. So it's good for us because we're looking at leagues where we didn't necessarily always look before, and uh, we're gonna we'll see this year in our recruiting class, we're going to be getting players from a lot of different places. So from a team's perspective, uh, the dynamics within the team are going to change a little bit. And I think that's going to help with our cohesiveness because we're really lucky to be able to recruit nationwide and across North America. Over the years, we've had players from all provinces in Canada and across the United States. And more recently, just because of the quality of players we've been able to get from the QMJHL, we've got a lot of players from the Q. So now with these new rules, we'll be looking to expand that horizon a little bit and get some players from outside of Quebec. It's probably more likely that we're going to end up going to some different leagues and different junior leagues that we wouldn't normally be in. Now, looking at that holistically, think about the quality of play. It's people are worried about that for U Sports, but when you think about it, there's 63 give or take NCAA Division One teams. Well, they didn't increase the number of teams yet, and they might be increasing it by a couple, but nonetheless, there's still the same pool of players that's available to play an elite level of hockey. So now it's our job to go find that same quality of player that maybe it's just that they take a little bit more time to develop, and maybe our coaching um, set up for the league when we organize our season, there's a little bit more development time for those players because that's what they require to be elite players. Maybe they're not as ready to go in their first year, but maybe they're ahead of them in their third and fourth years. That guys coming from the CHL. So that's to be seen, and that's going to be our challenge going forward. But yeah, at this time of year, usually we have our full recruiting class, give or take, with the exception of one or two guys committed. And right now, there's a lot of people that are still kind of waiting to see what the environment looks like, if they're going to get more offers in the NCAA, that sort of stuff. So I think I'll wrap it up by saying that, our the quality of hockey is great in U Sports, and particularly in the OUA East. We had the national finals was two teams from the OUA East, and it's we get to play good hockey on a daily basis. We have quality people in our program, and we have guys that are going to play pro every year. And so I think that's when it comes down to it, that's our goal, is to continue to do that. And I think in the short term, there's going to be, 18 to 24 months of feeling out stage where people are going to get to know the environment a little bit better. They're going to the CHL players are going to understand what that NCAA route could look like, and I think there's going to be it'll kind of normalize in the next couple of years.
No, first of all, the level of play in U Sports, as I mentioned before, has really gotten more attention, I would say, over the past, I don't know if it's 10 years. Obviously, I'm not an expert in it, but I've just noticed myself talking from Germany, Austin Keating this year, who was University of New Brunswick, came over this year to Ingolstadt and I think ended up being their second leading scorer in their 2 year extension. And that's a guy straight from the U Sport route. And Eric Ubo, obviously, who was with us, is another example. Um, I'm curious how it's going to look in 5 to 10 years with that recruiting thing. I think like by then it won't be the new shiny toy anymore. And my biggest thing has always been someone that went the D3 route after Niagara was I feel like it's going to affect D3 a lot because a lot of these Canadians now who have, I'd say, more competition for these scholarships or at the start at least, they might say, you know what, I'm not going to go spend my 30, 40 grand to go to school at D3. I'm going to go U Sports now. So I think it's actually going to, in my opinion, negatively affect the Canadians going to the D3 route more so, and they'll maybe more will go. So that might benefit you guys, where there's guys who would rather have gone D3 before that might say, hey, actually, I'm going to come play U Sports, interested in this route. So time will tell, as you said. It's you guys obviously have your recruiting process, and as you mentioned, right now there's some guys doing holdouts, which I think is probably going to become more normal. But it's been great talking to you today. You've been very generous with your time. I always end on this question. Like to ask my guests as kind of little advice for the listeners. So, what is one piece of advice or multiple pieces of advice you would give the younger generation out there?
I would say whatever domain that you're in, whatever it is you're passionate about, be a lifelong learner. And that means, the work is never done. So if you're interested in hockey, if you're interested in coaching, if you're interested in finance, whatever that may be, is to be a sponge. Be around people that are elite at what they do and learn from them, because success leaves clues. So if you're following somebody who is world class at what they do, and you're really studying them and understanding their process, you're gonna be able to take something out of that. So um, be that lifelong learner, work hard at your craft, and you'll be destined for success in wherever it is you do.
That's another good one. You've had two very good quotes here on this podcast. The first one about the planting the seeds and getting rid of the weeds and all that. And that one too. That was a good one. And we started with a good one and we ended with a good one. So it worked out well. But yeah, David, I appreciate you doing this. It's good that we finally got to link up. Obviously, we've been
Yeah.
emailing there a little bit throughout the season, and both of our schedules were a little hectic. But happy to see the success you guys are having there at McGill. It sounds like going forward, it's just going to continue. There'll be strong recruiting classes coming in, and you guys will be a strong program there for years to come. And yeah, happy we got to do this. Hopefully, I'll have to send this one to Dallas and give him a listen. So maybe he's got some other stories that we can do in episode 2 on.
Yeah, yeah, great. And yeah, make sure you say hi to Dallas for me. And yeah, if you're ever in Montreal, or we're back in Niagara, we'll try to connect too.
Is that where you go in the summers? You go back to Niagara?
Not that often. Yeah,
Okay.
my wife's family's in Newmarket area, and so we go back kind of back and forth, but it's usually kind of like an in and out.
Yeah.
It's always too quick. I never have enough time to bring my equipment to play with the guys. So
Yeah, that sometimes happens. But yeah, I guess if I'm ever in the Montreal area or if you're ever in the GTA area, we'll have to link up and we can share some more stories. But thanks again for doing this and best of luck in the future.
thanks. Great chatting.
And for those listening, until next week, cheers and ciao.